The ninth story. Master Simone, the physician, having been induced by Bruno and buffalamacicio to repair to a certain place by night, there to be made a member of a company that goeth a-roving, is cast by buffalamacicio into a trench full of ordure and there left. After the ladies had chatted a while over the community of wives practiced by the two Sienese, the queen, with whom alone it rested to tell, so she would not do Dionio an unright, began on this wise. Right well, lovesome ladies, did Spinaloxio deserve the cheat put upon him by Zeppa. Wherefore meseemeth he is not severely to be blamed, as Pampinea sought a while ago to show, who putteth a cheat on those who go seeking it or deserve it. Now Spinaloxio deserved it, and I mean to tell you of one who went seeking it for himself. Those who tricked him I hold not to be blameworthy, but rather commendable, and he to whom it was done was a physician, who, having set out for Bologna a sheepshead, returned to Florence all covered with miniver. As we see daily, our townsmen return hither from Bologna, this a judge, that a physician and a third a notary, tricked out with robes long and large and scarlets and minivers and store of other fine paraphernalia, and make a mighty brave show, to which how far the effects conform we may still see all day long. Among the rest a certain Master Simone de Villa, richer in inherited goods than in learning, returned hither, no great while since, a doctor of medicine, according to his own account, clad all in scarlet and with a great miniver hood, and took a house in the street which we call nowadays the Via del Cacamero. This said Master Simone, being thus newly returned, as hath been said, had, amongst other his notable customs, a trick of asking whosoever was with him, who was no matter what man he saw pass in the street, and as if of the doings and fashions of men he should compound the medicines he gave his patients, he took note of all and laid them all up in his memory. Amongst others on whom it occurred to him more particularly to cast his eyes were two painters of whom it hath already twice today been discoursed, namely Bruno and Buffalmacco, who were neighbors of his and still went in company. Himseeming they recked less of the world and lived more merrily than other folk, as was indeed the case. He questioned divers persons of their condition, and hearing from all that they were poor men and painters, he took it into his head that it might not be they lived so blithely of their poverty, but concluded, for that he had heard they were shrewd fellows, that they must needs derive very great profits from some source unknown to the general. Wherefore he was taken with a desire to clap up an acquaintance, and he might, with them both, or at least with one of them, and succeeded in making friends with Bruno. The latter, perceiving, after he had been with him a few times, that the physician was a very jackass, began to give himself the finest time in the world with him, and to be hugely diverted with his extraordinary humours, whilst Master Simone in like manner took a marvellous delight in his company. After a while, having sundry times bidden him to dinner, and thinking himself entitled in consequence to discourse familiarly with him, he discovered to him the wonderment that he felt at him and Buffalmacco, how, being poor men, they lived so merrily, and besought him to apprise him how they did. Bruno, hearing this talk from the physician and him seeing the question was one of his wonted witless impertinences, fell a-laughing in his sleeve, and bethinking himself to answer him according as his folly deserved, said, "Doctor, there are not many whom I would tell how we do, but you I shall not scruple to tell, for that you are a friend, and I know you will not repeat it to any. It is true we live, my friend and I, as merrily and as well as it appeareth to you, nay, more so, albeit neither of our craft nor of revenues we derive from any possessions might we have enough to pay for the very water we consume. Yet I would not, for all that, have you think that we go steal. Nay, we go a-roving, and thence, without hurt unto any, we get us all to which we have a mind, or for which we have occasion, hence the merry life you see us lead." The physician, hearing this and believing it, without knowing what it was, marveled exceedingly and forthright conceiving an ardent desire to know what manner of thing this going a-roving might be, besought him very urgently to tell him, affirming that he would assuredly never discover it to any. "Alack, doctor," cried Bruno, "what is this you ask me? This you would know is too great a secret, and a thing to undo me, and drive me from the world, nay, to bring me into the mouth of the Lucifer of San Gallo, should any come to know it. But so great is the love I bear your right worshipful pumpkin headship of Legnaja, and the confidence I have in you that I can deny you nothing you would have. Wherefore I will tell it you, on condition that you swear to me by the cross at Montesone, never, as you have promised, to tell it to anyone. Footnote 398. The commentators note here that on the church door of San Gallo was depicted an especially frightful Lucifer, with many mouths. The physician declared that he would never repeat what he should tell him, and Bruno said, "You must know, then, honey doctor mine, that not long since there was in this city a great master in necromancy, who was called Michael Scott, for that he was of Scotland, and who received the greatest hospitality from many gentlemen, of whom few are nowadays alive. Wherefore, being minded to depart hence, he left them, at their instant prayers, 2 of his ablest disciples, whom he enjoined still to hold themselves in readiness to satisfy every wish of the gentlemen who had so worshipfully entertained him. These 2, then, freely served the aforesaid gentlemen in certain amours of theirs and other small matters, and afterward, the city and the usages of the folk pleasing them, they determined to abide there always. Accordingly, they contracted great and straight friendship with certain of the townfolk, regarding not who they were, whether gentle or simple, rich or poor, but solely if they were men comfortable to their own usances. And to pleasure these who were thus become their friends, they founded a company of maybe 25 men, who should foregather twice at the least in the month in some place appointed of them, where being assembled, each should tell them his desire, which they would forthright accomplish unto him for that night. Buffalmacco and I, having an especial friendship and intimacy with these 2, were put of them on the roll of the aforesaid company, and are still thereof. And I may tell you that, what time it chanceth that we assemble together, it is a marvelous thing to see the hangings about the saloon where we eat and the tables spread on royal wise, and the multitude of noble and goodly servants, as well female as male, at the pleasure of each one who is of the company, and the basins and ewers and flagons and goblets and the vessels of gold and silver, wherein we eat and drink, more by token of the many and various viands that are set before us, each in its season, according to that which each one desireth. I could never avail to set out to you what and how many are the sweet sounds of innumerable instruments, and the songs full of melody that are heard there. Nor might I tell you how much wax is burned at these suppers, nor what and how many are the confections that are consumed there, nor how costly are the wines that are drunken. But I would not have you believe, good saltless pumpkinhead mine, that we abide there in this habit, and with these clothes that you see us wear every day. Nay, there is none of us of so little account but would seem to you an emperor, so richly are we adorned with vestments of price and fine things. But over all the other pleasures that be there is that of fair ladies, who, so one but will it, are incontinent brought thither from the 4 quarters of the world. There might you see the sovereign lady of the rascal roughs, the queen of the Basques, the wife of the Soldan, the empress of the Usbeg Tartars, the driggle-draggle-tail of Norway, the Mala Green of Flapdoodleland, and the Madcate of Woolgather Green. But why need I enumerate them to you? There be all the queens in the world, even, I may say, to the surreverence of Prester John, who hath his horns a middleward his arse, see you now. There, after we have drunken and eaten confections, and walked a dance or 2, each lady betaketh herself to her bedchamber with him at whose instance she hath been brought thither. And you must know that these bedchambers are a very paradise to behold, so goodly they are. Aye, and they are no less odoriferous than are the spice-boxes of your shop, ween as you let bray come and seed, and therein are beds that would seem to you goodlier than that of the Doge of Venice, and in these they betake themselves to rest. Marry, what a working of the treadles, what a hauling to of the battens to make the cloth close, these weaverses keep up, I will e'en leave you to imagine. But of those who fare best, to my seeming, are Buffalmacco and myself, for that he most times letteth come thither the Queen of France for himself, whilst I send for her of England, the which are 2 of the fairest ladies in the world, and we have known so to do that they have none other eye in their head than us. Wherefore you may judge for yourself if we can and should live and go more merrily than other men, seeing we have the love of 2 such queens, more by token that, ween as we would have 1,000 or 2,000 florins of them, we get them not. This, then, we commonly style going a-roving, for that, like as the rovers take every man's good, even so do we, save that we are in this much different from them that they never restore that which they take, whereas we return it again, weenas we have used it. Now, worthy doctor mine, you have heard what it is we call going a-roving. But how strictly this requireth to be kept secret you can see for yourself, and therefore I say no more to you nor pray you thereof. Footnote 400, i.e. they think of and cherish us alone, holding us as dear as their very eyes. The physician, whose science reached no farther belike than the curing children of the scaldhead, gave as much credit to Bruno's story as had been due to the most manifest truth, and was inflamed with as great desire to be received into that company as might be kindled in any for the most desirable thing in the world. Wherefore he made answer to him that assuredly it was no marvel if they went merry, and hardly constrained himself to defer requesting him to bring him to be there, until such time as, having done him further hospitality, he might with more confidence proffer his request to him. Accordingly, reserving this unto a more favorable season, he proceeded to keep straighter usance with Bruno, having him morning and evening to eat with him, and showing him an inordinate affection. And indeed so great and so constant was this their commerce that it seemed as if the physician could not nor knew how to live without the painter. The latter, finding himself in good case, so he might not appear ungrateful for the hospitality shown him, had painted Master Simon a picture of Lent in his saloon, besides an Agnus Dei at the entering in of his chamber and a chamber pot over the street door, so those who had occasion for his advice might know how to distinguish him from the others. And in a little gallery he had depictured him the battle of the rats and the cats, which appeared to the physician a very fine thing. Moreover, he said whiles to him, weenas he had not supper with him overnight, I was at the society yesternight, and being a trifle tired of the Queen of England, I caused fetch me the dolidoxy of the Grand Cham of Tartary. What meaneth dolidoxy? Asked Master Simon. I do not understand these names. Marry, doctor mine, replied Bruno, I marvel not thereat, for I have right well heard that Porcagrasso and Vanisna say not thereof. Quoth the physician. Thou meanest Ipocrasso and Avicenna. I faith, answered Bruno, I know not. Understand your names as ill as you do mine, but dolidoxy in the Grand Cam's lingo meaneth as much as to say empress in our tongue. Egad, you would think her a plaguy fine woman. I dare well say she would make you forget your drugs, and your clysters, and all your plasters. Footnote 401, i.e. fat hog and get thee to supper, burlesque perversions of the names Ipocrasso, Hippocrates, and Avicenna. On this wise he bespoke him at one time and another, to enkindle him the more, till one night, what while it chanced my lord doctor held the light to Bruno, who was in act to paint the battle of the rats and the cats, the former, him seeming he had now well taken him with his hospitalities, determined to open his mind to him. And accordingly they being alone together, he said to him, God knoweth, Bruno, there is no one alive for whom I would do everything as I would for thee. Indeed, shouldst thou bid me go hence to Paratola, methinketh it would take little to make me go thither. Wherefore I would not have thee marvel if I require thee of somewhat familiarly and with confidence. As thou knowest, it is no great while since thou bespokest me of the fashions of your merry company. Wherefore so great a longing hath taken me to be one of you that never did I desire aught so much. Nor is this my desire without cause, as thou shalt see, if ever it chance that I be of your company. For I give thee leave to make mock of me, and I cause not come thither the finest serving wench thou ever setst eyes on. I saw her but last year at Cacavinsigli and wish her all my weal. And by the body of Christ, I had e'en given her 50 Bolognese groats, so she would but have consented to me, but she would not. Wherefore, as most I may, I prithee teach me what I must do to avail to be of your company, and do thou also do and contrive so I may be thereof. Indeed, you will have in me a good and loyal comrade, aye, and a worshipful. Thou seest, to begin with, what a fine man I am, and how well I am set up on my legs. Aye, and I have a face as it were a rose, more by token that I am a doctor of medicine, such as I believe you have none among you. Moreover, I know many fine things and goodly canzonets. Marry, I will sing you one. And incontinent he fell a-singing. Footnote 402, i.e. love her beyond anything in the world. For former instances of this idiomatic expression, see ante, passim. Bruno had so great a mind to laugh that he was like to burst, However he contained himself, and the physician, having made an end of his song, said, "How deemedst thou thereof?" "Certes," answered Bruno, "there's no Jew's harp but would lose with you, so archigothically do you caterwarble it." Quoth Master Simon, "I tell thee thou wouldst never have believed it, hadst thou not heard me." "Certes," replied Bruno, "you say sooth." And the physician went on, "I know store of others, but let that be for the present. Such as thou seest me, my father was a gentleman, albeit he abode in the country, and I myself come by my mother of the Vallecchio family. Moreover, as thou mayst have seen, I have the finest books and gowns of any physician in Florence. Cock's faith, I have a gown that stood me, all reckoned, in nigh upon 100 pounds of doits, more than 60 years ago. Wherefore I pray thee as most I may, to bring me to be of your company, and by Cock's faith, and thou do it, thou mayst be as ill as thou wilt, for I will never take a farthing of thee for my services." Bruno, hearing this, and the physician seeming to him a greater numbskull than ever, said, "Doctor, hold the light a thought more this way, and take patience till I have made these rats their tales, and after I will answer you." The tales being finished, Bruno made believe that the physician's request was exceeding irksome to him, and said, "Doctor mine, these be great things you would do for me, and I acknowledge it. Nevertheless, that which you ask of me, little as it may be for the greatness of your brain, is yet to me a very grave matter, nor know I anyone in the world for whom, it being in my power, I would do it. And I did it not for you, both because I love you as it behoveth and on account of your words, which are seasoned with so much wit that they would draw the straps out of a pair of boots, much more me from my purpose. For the more I consort with you, the wiser you appear to me. And I may tell you this, to boot, that, though I had none other reason, yet do I wish you well, for that I see you enamored of so fair a creature as is she of whom you speak. But this much I will say to you, I have no such power in this matter as you suppose, and cannot therefore do for you that which were behoving. However, and you will promise me, upon your solemn and surbated faith, to keep it me secret, I will tell you the means you must use, and meseemeth certain that, with such fine books and other gear as you tell me you have, you will gain your end." Footnote 403, Sin. Cauterized, calterita, a nonsensical word employed by Bruno for the purpose of mystifying the credulous physician. Quoth the doctor, "Say on in all assurance. I see thou art not yet well acquainted with me, and knowest not how I can keep a secret. There be few things, indeed, that Messer Guaspariulo de Salisto did. Weenas he was judge of the provostry at Forlimpopoli, but he sent to tell me, for that he found me so good a secret keeper. And wilt thou judge, and I say sooth? I was the first man whom he told that he was to marry Bergamina. Seest thou now?" "Marry then," rejoined Bruno, "all is well. If such a man trusted in you, I may well do so. The course you must take is on this wise. You must know that we still have to this our company a captain and 2 counselors, who are changed from 6 months to 6 months, and without fail, at the first of the month, Buffalmacco will be captain, and I shall be counselor, for so it is settled. Now whoso is captain can do much by way of procuring whomsoever he will to be admitted into the company. Wherefore meseemeth you should seek, inasmuch as you may, to gain Buffalmacco's friendship, and do him honor. He is a man, seeing you so wise, to fall in love with you incontinent, and weenas with your wit, and with these fine things you shall have somedel ingratiated yourself with him, you can make your request to him. He will not know how to say you nay. I have already bespoken him of you, and he wisheth you all the weal in the world, and weenas you shall have done this, leave me do with him." Quoth the physician, "That which thou counsellest liketh me well. Indeed, and he be a man who delighteth in men of learning and talketh, but with me a little, I will engage to make him go still seeking my company. For that, as for wit, I have so much thereof that I could stock a city withal, and yet abide exceeding wise." This being settled, Bruno imparted the whole matter to Buffalmacco, wherefore it seemed to the latter 1,000 years till they should come to do that which this archzany went seeking. The physician, who longed beyond measure to go a-roving, rested not till he made friends with Buffalmacco, which he easily succeeded in doing, and therewithal he fell to giving him, and Bruno with him, the finest suppers and dinners in the world. The 2 painters, like the accommodating gentlemen they were nothing loath to engage with him, and having once tasted the excellent wines and fat capons and other good things galore, with which he plied them, stuck very close to him and ended by quartering themselves upon him, without awaiting overmuch invitation, still declaring that they would not do this for another. Presently, ween as it seemed to him time, the physician made the same request to Buffalmacco as he had made Bruno aforetime. Whereupon Buffalmacco feigned himself sore chagrined and made a great outcry against Bruno, saying, I vow to the high God of Passignano that I can scarce withhold myself from giving thee such a clout over the head as should cause thy nose drop to thy heels, traitor that thou art. For none other than thou hath discovered these matters to the doctor. Master Simon did his utmost to excuse Bruno, saying and swearing that he had learned the thing from another quarter, and after many of his wise words, he succeeded in pacifying Buffalmacco. Whereupon the latter turned to him and said, Doctor mine, it is very evident that you have been at Bologna and have brought back a close mouth to these parts. And I tell you moreover that you have not learnt your AB 100 on the apple as many blockheads are fain to do. Nay, you have learned it aright on the pumpkin, that is so long, and if I mistake not, you were baptized on a Sunday. And albeit Bruno hath told me that you studied medicine there, meseemeth you studied rather to learn to catch men, the which you, with your wit and your fine talk, know better to do than any man I ever set eyes on. Here the physician took the words out of his mouth and breaking in, said to Bruno, What a thing it is to talk and consort with learned men! Who would so have quickly apprehended every particular of my intelligence as hath this worthy man? Thou didst not half so speedily become aware of my value as he, but at the least, that which I told thee, ween as thou saidst to me that Buffalmacco delighted in learned men, seemeth it to thee I have done it? Aye hast thou, replied Bruno, and better. Footnote 405. A play of words upon mela, apple, and melon, pumpkin. Melon is strictly a watermelon, but I have rendered it pumpkin, to preserve the English idiom, pumpkinhead being our equivalent for the Italian melon, used in the sense of dullard noodle. Footnote 406. According to the commentators, baptized on a Sunday anciently signified a simpleton, because salt, which is constantly used by the Italian classical writers as a synonym for wit or sense, was not sold on Sundays. Then said the doctor to Buffalmacco, Thou wouldst have told another tale, hadst thou seen me at Bologna, where there was none, great or small, doctor or scholar, but wished me all the weal in the world. So well did I know to content them all with my discourse and my wit. And what is more, I never said a word there, but I made every one laugh, so hugely did I please them. And ween as I departed thence, they all set up the greatest lament in the world, and would all have had me remain there. Nay, to such a pass came it for that I should abide there, that they would have left it to me alone to lecture on medicine to as many students as were there. But I would not, for that I was minded to come hither to certain very great heritages which I have here and which have still been in my family, and so I did. Quoth Bruno to Buffalmacco, How deemest thou? Thou believest me not, ween as I told it thee. By the evangels, there is not a leech in these parts who is versed in asses' water to compare with this one, and assuredly thou wouldst not find another of him from here to Paris gates. Marry, hold yourself henceforth from doing that which he will. Quoth Master Simon, Bruno saith sooth, but I am not understood here. You Florentines are somewhat dull of wit, but I would have you see me among the doctors, as I am used to be. Verily, doctor, said Buffalmacco, you are far wiser than I could ever have believed. Wherefore to speak to you as it should be spoken to scholars such as you are, I tell you, cut-and-slash-fashion, I will without fail procure you to be of our company. After this promise, the physician redoubled in his hospitalities to the two rogues, who enjoyed themselves what while they crammed him with the greatest extravagances in the world, and fooled him to the top of his bent, promising him to give him to Mistress the Countess of Jakes, who was the fairest creature to be found in all the back settlements of the human generation. The physician enquired who this countess was, whereto quoth Buffalmacco, Good my seed pumpkin, she is a very great lady, and there be few houses in the world wherein she hath not some jurisdiction. To say nothing of others, the minor friars themselves render her tribute, to the sound of kettle drums. And I can assure you that, ween as she goeth abroad, she maketh herself well felt, albeit she abideth for the most part shut up. Nathless, it is no great while since she passed by your door, one night that she repaired to the Arno, to wash her feet and take the air a little. But her most continual abiding place is in Drafthouse Elland. There go oft times about store of her surgeons, who all in token of her supremacy bear the staff and the plummet, and of her barons many are everywhere to be seen, such as Surreverance of the Gate, Goodman Turd, Hardcake, Squitterbreech, and others, who methinketh are your familiars, albeit you call them not presently to mind. In the soft arms, then, of this great lady, leaving be her of Cacavan-Sigley, we will, an expectation cheat us not, bestow you. Footnote 408. La Contessa di Civillari, i.e. the public sewers. Civillari, according to the commentators, was the name of an alley in Florence, where all the ordure and filth of the neighborhood was deposited and stored in trenches for manure. The physician, who had been born and bred at Bologna, understood not their canting terms, and accordingly avouched himself well pleased with the lady in question. Not long after this talk, the painters brought him news that he was accepted to member of the company, and the day being come before the night appointed for their assembly, he had them both to dinner. When they had dined, he asked them what means it behoved him take to come thither, whereupon quoth Buffalmacco, "Look you, doctor, it behoveth you have plenty of assurance. For that, and you be not mighty resolute, you may chance to suffer hindrance and do us very great hurt, and in what it behoveth you to approve yourself very stout-hearted you shall hear. You must find means to be this evening, at the season of the first sleep, on one of the raised tombs which have been lately made without Santa Maria Novella, with one of your finest gowns on your back, so you may make an honorable figure for your first appearance before the company, and also because, according to what was told us, we were not there after. The Countess is minded, for that you are a man of gentle birth, to make you a knight of the Bath at her own proper costs and charges. And there you must wait till there cometh for you he whom we shall send. And so you may be apprised of everything, there will come for you a black-horned beast, not overbig, which will go capering about the piazza before you and making a great whistling and bounding to terrify you. But when he seeth that you are not to be daunted, he will come up to you quietly. Then do you, without any fear, come down from the tomb and mount the beast, naming neither God nor the saints. And as soon as you are settled on his back, you must cross your hands upon your breast, in the attitude of obeisance, and touch him no more. He will then set off softly and bring you to us. But if you call upon God or the saints or show fear, I must tell you that he may chance to cast you off or strike you into some place where you are like to stink for it. Wherefore, and your heart misgive you, and unless you can make sure of being mighty resolute, come not thither, for you would but do us a mischief, without doing yourself any good. Footnote 413, lit. Do yourself a mischief, without doing us any good, but the sequel shows that the contrary is meant, as in the text. Quoth the physician, I see you know me not yet. Maybe you judge of me by my gloves and long gown. If you knew what I did aforetimes at Bologna Annets, when I went a-wenching whiles with my comrades, you would marvel. Cock's faith, there was such and such a night when, one of them refusing to come with us, more by token that she was a scurvy little baggage, no higher than my fist, I dealt her, to begin with good store of cuffs, then, taking her up bodily, I dare say I carried her a crossbow shot, and wrought so that needs must she come with us. Another time I remember me that, without any other in my company than a serving man of mine, I passed yonder alongside the cemetery of the minor friars, a little after the Ave Maria, albeit there had been a woman buried there that very day, and felt no whit of fear. Wherefore misdoubt you not of this, for I am but too stout of heart and lusty. Moreover, I tell you that, to do you credit at my coming thither, I will don my gown of scarlet, wherein I was admitted doctor, and we shall see if the company rejoice not at my sight, and I be not made captain out of hand. You shall e'en see how the thing will go, once I am there, since, without having yet set eyes on me, this countess hath fallen so enamored of me that she is minded to make me a knight of the Bath. It may be knighthood will not sit so ill on me, nor shall I be at a loss to carry it off with worship. Marry, only leave me do. You say very well, answered Buffalmacco, but look you leave us not in the lurch, and not come or not be found at the trysting place, weenas we shall send for you. And this I say, for that the weather is cold, and you gentlemen doctors are very careful of yourselves thereanent. God forbid, cried Master Simone. I am none of your chilly ones. I reck not of the cold. Seldom or never, Weenas I rise of a night for my bodily occasions, as a man will bytimes. Do I put me on more than my fur gown over my doublet? Wherefore I will certainly be there. Thereupon they took leave of him, and weenas it began to grow towards night. Master Simon contrived to make some excuse or other to his wife, and secretly got out his fine gown. Then, weenas it seemed to him time, he donned it and betook himself to Santa Maria Novella, where he mounted one of the aforesaid tombs, and huddling himself up on the marble, for that the cold was great, he proceeded to wait the coming of the beast. Meanwhile Buffalmacco, who was tall and robust of his person, made shift to have one of those masks that were wont to be used for certain games which are not held nowadays, and donning a black fur pelisse, inside out, arrayed himself therein on such wise that he seemed a very bear, save that his mask had a devil's face and was horned. Thus accoutred, he betook himself to the new piazza of Santa Maria, Bruno following him to see how the thing should go. As soon as he perceived that the physician was there, he fell a-capering and caracoling, and made a terrible great blustering about the piazza, whistling and howling and bellowing as he were possessed of the devil. When Master Simon, who was more fearful than a woman, heard and saw this, every hair of his body stood on end, and he fell a-trembling all over, and it was now he had liefer been at home than there. Nevertheless, since he was e'en there, he enforced himself to take heart, so overcome was he with desire to see the marvels whereof the painters had told him. After Buffalmacco had raged about a while, as hath been said, he made a show of growing pacified, and coming up to the tomb whereon was the physician, stood stock still. Master Simon, who was all a-tremble for fear, knew not what to do, whether to mount or abide where he was. However, at last, fearing that the beast should do him a mischief, and he mounted him not, he did away the first fear with the second, and coming down from the tomb, mounted on his back, saying softly, "God aid me." Then he settled himself as best he might, and still trembling in every limb, crossed his hands upon his breast, as it had been enjoined him. Whereupon Buffalmacco set off at an amble towards Santa Maria della Scala, and going on all fours, brought him hard by the nunnery of Ripple. In those days there were dykes in that quarter, wherein the tillers of the neighboring lands let empty the jakes, to manure their fields withal. Whereto weenas Buffalmacco came nigh, he went up to the brink of one of them, and taking the opportunity, laid hold of one of the physician's legs, and jerking him off his back, pitched him clean in, head foremost. Then he fell a-snorting and snarling and capering, and raged about a while, after which he made off alongside Santa Maria della Scala till he came to Allhallows Fields. There he found Bruno, who had taken to flight, for that he was unable to restrain his laughter. And with him, after they had made merry together at Master Simon's expense, he addressed himself to see from afar what the bemoiled physician should do. My lord Leech, finding himself in that abominable place, struggled to arise and strove as best he might to win forth thereof. And after falling in again and again, now here and now there, and swallowing some drams of the filth, he at last succeeded in making his way out of the dyke, in the woefulest of plights, bewrayed from head to foot, and leaving his bonnet behind him. Then, having wiped himself as best he might with his hands, and knowing not what other course to take, he returned home and knocked till it was opened to him. Hardly was he entered, stinking as he did, and the door shut again ere up came Bruno and Buffalmacco, to hear how he should be received of his wife, and standing hearkening, they heard the lady give him the foulest rating was ever given poor devil, saying, "Good lack, what a pickle thou art in. Thou hast been gallanting it to some other woman, and must needs seek to cut a figure with thy gown of scarlet. What, was not I enough for thee? Why, man alive, I could suffice to a whole people, let alone thee. Would God they had choked thee, like as they cast thee whereas thou deservedst to be thrown. Here's a fine physician for you, to have a wife of his own, and go a-gadding annets after other folks' womankind." And with these, and many other words of the same fashion, she gave not over tormenting him till midnight, what while the physician let wash himself from head to foot. Next morning up came Bruno and Buffalmacco, who had painted all their flesh under their clothes with livid blotches, such as beatings used to make, and entering the physician's house, found him already arisen. Accordingly, they went in to him, and found the whole place full of stench, for that they had not yet been able so to clean everything that it should not stink there. Master Simon, seeing them enter, came to meet them and bade God give them good day, whereto the two rogues, as they had agreed beforehand, replied with an angry air, saying, That say we not to you. Nay, rather, we pray God give you so many ill years that you may die a dog's death, as the most disloyal man and the vilest traitor alive. For it was no thanks to you that, whereas we studied to do you pleasure and worship, we were not slain like dogs. As it is, thanks to your disloyalty, we have gotten so many buffets this past night that an ass would go to Rome for less, without reckoning that we have gone in danger of being expelled the company into which we had taken order for having you received. And you believe us not, look at our bodies and see how they have fared. Then, opening their clothes in front, they showed him, by an uncertain light, their breasts all painted and covered them up again in haste. The physician would have excused himself and told of his mishaps and how and where he had been cast. But Buffalmacco said, would he had thrown you off the bridge into the Arno. Why did you call on God and the saints? Were you not forewarned of this? By God his faith, replied the physician, I did it not. How? Cried Buffalmacco. You did not call on them. Egad, you did it again and again, for our messenger told us that you shook like a reed and knew not where you were. Marry, for the nonce you have befooled us finely, but never again shall anyone serve us thus, and we will yet do you such honor thereof as you merit. The physician fell to craving pardon and conjuring them for God's sake not to dishonor him, and studied to appease them with the best words he could command. And if aforetime he had entreated them with honor, from that time forth he honored them yet more and made much of them, entertaining them with banquets and other what, for fear lest they should publish his shame. Thus, then, as you have heard, is sense taught to whoso hath learned no great store thereof at Bologna. The 10th story. A certain woman of Sicily artfully despoileth, a merchant of that which he had brought to Palermo. But she, making believe to have returned thither, with much greater plenty of merchandise than before, borroweth money of her, and leaveth her water and tow in payment. How much the queen's story in divers places made the ladies laugh, it needed not to ask. Suffice it to say that there was none of them to whose eyes the tears had not come a dozen times for excess of laughter. But after it had an end, Dionio, knowing that it was come to his turn to tell, said, Gracious ladies, it is a manifest thing that sleights and devices are the more pleasing, the subtler the trickster who is thereby artfully outwitted. Wherefore, albeit you have related very fine stories, I mean to tell you one, which should please you more than any other that hath been told upon the same subject. Inasmuch as she who was cheated was a greater mistress of the art of cheating others than was any of the men or women who were cozened by those of whom you have told. There used to be, and belike is yet, a custom in all maritime places which have a port, that all merchants who come thither with merchandise, having unloaded it, should carry it all into a warehouse, which is in many places called a custom house, kept by the commonalty or by the lord of the place. There they give unto those who are deputed to that end a note in writing of all their merchandise and the value thereof, and they thereupon make over to each merchant a storehouse, wherein he layeth up his goods under lock and key. Moreover, the said officers enter in the book of the customs, to each merchant's credit, all his merchandise, causing themselves after he paid their dues of the merchants, whether for all his said merchandise, or for such part thereof as he withdraweth from the custom house. By this book of the customs, the brokers mostly inform themselves of the quality and the quantity of the goods that are in bond there, and also who are the merchants that own them. And with these latter, as occasion serveth them, they treat of exchanges and barters and sales and other transactions. This usance, amongst many other places, was current at Palermo in Sicily, where likewise there were, and are yet many women, very fair of their person, but sworn enemies to honesty, who would be and are by those who know them not held great ladies, and passing virtuous, and who, being given not to shave, but altogether to flay men, no sooner espy a merchant there than they inform themselves by the book of the customs of that which he hath there, and how much he can do. After which by their lovesome and engaging fashions, and with the most dulcet words, they study to allure the said merchants and draw them into the snare of their love. And many an one have they aforetime lured thereinto, from whom they have wiled great part of their merchandise. Nay, many have they despoiled of all, and of these there be some who have left goods and ship and flesh and bones in their hands, so sweetly hath the barbarous known to ply the razor. It chanced not long since that there came thither, sent by his masters, one of our young Florentines by name Niccolo de Signano, though more commonly called Salabito, with as many woolen cloths, left on his hands from the Salerno fair, as might be worth some 500 gold florins, which having given the custom-house officers the invoice thereof, he laid up in a magazine and began, without showing overmuch haste to dispose of them, to go bytimes a-pleasuring about the city. He being of a fair complexion and yellow-haired, and withal very sprightly and personable, it chanced that one of these same barbaresses, who styled herself Madame Biancofier, having heard somewhat of his affairs, cast her eyes on him, which he perceiving and taking her for some great lady, concluded that he pleased her for his good looks, and bethought himself to order this amour with the utmost secrecy. Wherefore, without saying aught thereof to any, he fell to passing and repassing before her house. She, noting this, after she had for some days well enkindled him with her eyes, making believe to languish for him, privily dispatched to him one of her women, who was a past mistress in the procuring art, and who, after much parley, told him, well nigh with tears in her eyes, that he had so taken her mistress with his comeliness and his pleasing fashions that she could find no rest day or night. Wherefore, ween as it pleased him, she desired, more than aught else, to avail to foregather with him privily in a bagnio. Then, pulling a ring from her pouch, she gave it to him on the part of her mistress. Salabito, hearing this, was the joyfullest man that was I, and taking the ring, rubbed it against his eyes and kissed it. After which he set it on his finger, and replied to the good woman that, if Madame Biancofier loved him, she was well requited it, for that he loved her more than his proper life, and was ready to go wheresoever it should please her, and at any hour. The messenger returned to her mistress with this answer, and it was appointed Salabito out of hand, at what bagnio he should expect her on the ensuing day after vespers. Accordingly, without saying aught of the matter to any, he punctually repaired thither at the hour appointed him, and found the bagnio taken by the lady. Nor had he waited long ere there came two slave girls laden with gear, and bearing on their heads, the one a fine large mattress of cotton wool, and the other a great basket full of gear. The mattress they set on a bedstead, in one of the chambers of the bagnio, and spread thereon a pair of very fine sheets, laced with silk together, with a counterpane of snow-white cypress buckram, and two pillows wonder-curiously wrought. Then, putting off their clothes, they entered the bath, and swept it all, and washed it excellent well. Nor was it long ere the lady herself came thither, with other two slave girls, and accosted Salabito with the utmost joy. Then, as first she had commodity, after she had both clipped and kissed him amming, heaving the heaviest sighs in the world, she said to him, I know not who could have brought me to this pass, other than thou. Thou hast kindled a fire in my vitals, little dog of a Tuscan. Then, at her instance, they entered the bath, both naked, and with them two of the slave girls. And there, without letting any else lay a finger on him, she with her own hands washed Salabito all wonder-well with musk and clove-scented soap, after which she let herself be washed and rubbed of the slave girls. This done, the latter brought two very white and fine sheets, whence came so great a scent of roses that everything there seemed roses, in one of which they wrapped Salabito, and in the other the lady, and taking them in their arms, carried them both to the bed prepared for them. There, weenas they had left sweating, the slave girls did them loose from the sheets wherein they were wrapped, and they abode naked in the others, whilst the girls brought out of the basket wonder-goodly casting bottles of silver, full of sweet waters, rose and jessamine and orange and citron flower scented, and sprinkled them all therewith. After which boxes of suckades and wines of great price were produced, and they refreshed themselves a while. Footnote 415. Bucharame. The word buckram was anciently applied to the finest linen cloth, as is apparently the case here. See Ducange, voce Bacquaranus, and Florio, voce Bucharame. It seemed to Salabito as he were in paradise, and he cast 1,000 glances at the lady, who was certes very handsome, him seeming each hour was 100 years, till the slave girls should be gone, and he should find himself in her arms. Presently, at her commandment, the girls departed the chamber, leaving a flambeau alight there. Whereupon she embraced Salabito and he her, and they abode together a great while, to the exceeding pleasure of the Florentine, to whom it seemed she was all afire for love of him. Weenas it seemed to her time to rise, she called the slave girls and they clad themselves. Then they recruited themselves somdel with a second collation of wine and sweetmeats, and washed their hands and faces with odoriferous waters. After which, being about to depart, the lady said to Salibido, "So it be agreeable to thee, it were doing me a very great favor an thou camest this evening to sup, and lie the night with me." Salibido, who was by this time altogether captivated by her beauty and the artful pleasantness of her fashions, and firmly believed himself to be loved of her as he were the heart out of her body, replied, "Madam, your every pleasure is supremely agreeable to me, wherefore both tonight and at all times I mean to do that which shall please you, and that which shall be commanded me of you." Accordingly, the lady returned to her house, where she caused well bedeck her bedchamber with her dresses and gear, and letting make ready a splendid supper, awaited Salibido, who, as soon as it was grown somewhat dark, betook himself thither, and being received with open arms, supped with all cheer and commodity of service. Thereafter they betook themselves into the bedchamber, where he smelt a marvelous fragrance of aloes wood, and saw the bed very richly adorned with Cyprian singing birds and store of fine dresses upon the pegs, all which things together, and each of itself, made him conclude that this must be some great and rich lady. And although he had heard some whispers to the contrary anent her manner of life, he would not anywise believe it, or, if he e'en gave so much credit thereto, as to allow that she might erst have cozened others, for nothing in the world could he have believed that this might possibly happen to himself. He lay that night with her in the utmost delight, still waxing more enamored, and in the morning she girt him on a quaint and goodly girdle of silver, with a fine purse thereto, saying, "Sweet my Salibido, I commend myself to thy remembrance, and like as my person is at thy pleasure, even so is all that is here and all that dependeth upon me at thy service and commandment." Salibido, rejoiced, embraced and kissed her. Then, going forth of her house, he betook himself whereas the other merchants were used to resort. Footnote 417. It was the custom in those days to attach to the bedposts sundry small instruments in the form of birds, which, by means of certain mechanical devices, gave forth sounds modulated like the song of actual birds. Fanfani. On this wise consorting with her at one time and another, without its costing him aught in the world, and growing every hour more entangled, it befell that he sold his stuffs for ready money and made a good profit thereby. Of which the lady incontinent heard, not from him, but from others, and Salibi, being come one night to visit her, she fell to prattling and wantoning with him, kissing and clipping him and feigning herself so enamored of him that it seemed she must die of love in his arms. Moreover, she would fain have given him 2 very fine hanaps of silver that she had, but he would not take them, for that he had had of her, at one time and another, what was worth a good 30 gold florins, without availing to have her take of him so much as a groat's worth. At last, weenas she had well enkindled him by showing herself so enamored and free-handed, one of her slave girls called her, as she had ordained beforehand. Whereupon she left the chamber, and coming back, after a while, in tears cast herself face downward on the bed, and fell to making the woefulest lamentation ever woman made. Salibido, marveling at this, caught her in his arms and fell a-weeping with her, and saying, "Alack, heart of my body, what aileth thee thus suddenly? What is the cause of this grief? For God's sake, tell it me, my soul." The lady, after letting herself be long entreated, answered, "Woe's me, sweet my lord, I know not what to say or to do. I have but now received letters from Messina, and my brother write me that, should I sell or pawn all that is here, I must without fail send him 1,000 gold florins within 8 days from this time, else will his head be cut off. And I know not how I shall do to get this sum so suddenly. Had I but 15 days' grace, I would find a means of procuring it from a certain quarter whence I am to have much more, or I would sell one of our farms. But as this may not be, I had liefer be dead than that this ill news should have come to me." Footnote 418. Sin. That which belongeth to us, ci, as I have before noted, signifying both here and us, dative and accusative. So saying, she made a show of being sore afflicted, and stinted not from weeping. Whereupon quoth Salibido, whom the flames of love had bereft of great part of his wonted good sense, so that he believed her tears to be true and her words truer yet, "Madam, I cannot oblige you with 1,000 florins, but 500 I can very well advance you, since you believe you will be able to return them to me within a fortnight from this time." And this is of your good fortune that chanced but yesterday to sell my stuffs, for had it not been so, could not have lent you a groat. Alack, cried the lady, hast thou then been straitened for lack of money? Mary, why didst thou not require me thereof? Though I have not 1,000, I had 100 and even 200 to give thee. Thou hast deprived me of all heart to accept of thee the service thou profferest me. Salibido was more than ever taken with these words and said, Madam, I would not have you refrain on that account, for, had I had such an occasion therefore as you presently have, I would assuredly have asked you. Alack, Salibido mine, replied the lady, now know I aright that thine is a true and perfect love for me, since, without waiting to be required, thou freely succoureth me, in such a strait, with so great a sum of money. Certes, I was all thine without this, but with this I shall be far more so, nor shall I ever forget that I owe thee my brother's life. But God knoweth I take it sore unwillingly, seeing that thou art a merchant, and that with money merchants transact all their affairs. However, since need constraineth me, and I have certain assurance of speedily restoring it to thee, I will e'en take it. And for the rest, and I find no readier means, I will pawn all these my possessions. So saying, she let herself fall, weeping, on Salibido's neck. He fell to comforting her, and after abiding the night with her, he, next morning, to approve himself her most liberal servant, without waiting to be asked by her, carried her 500 right gold florins, which she received with tears in her eyes, but laughter in her heart, Salibido contenting himself with her simple promise. As soon as the lady had the money, the signs began to change, and whereas before he had free access to her whensoever it pleased him, reasons now began to crop up, whereby it betided him not to win admission there once out of 7 times, nor was he received with the same countenance, nor the same caresses and rejoicings as before. And the term at which he was to have had his moneys again being, not to say come, but passed by a month or 2 and he requiring them, words were given him in payment. Thereupon his eyes were opened to the wicked woman's arts, and his own lack of wit, wherefore, feeling that he could say naught of her beyond that which might please her concerning the matter, since he had neither script nor other evidence thereof, and being ashamed to complain to any, as well for that he had been forewarned thereof as for fear of the scoffs which he might reasonably expect for his folly, he was beyond measure woeful and inwardly bewailed his credulity. At last, having had divers letters from his masters, requiring him to change the moneys in question and remit them to them, he determined to depart, lest, and he did it not, his default should be discovered there, and accordingly, going aboard a little ship, he betook himself, not to Pisa, as he should have done, but to Naples. There at that time was our gossip Pietro dello Canigiano, treasurer to the Empress of Constantinople, a man of great understanding and subtle wit, and a fast friend of Salibido and his family. And to him, as to a very discreet man, the disconsolate Florentine recounted that which he had done and the mischance that had befallen him, requiring him of aid and counsel, so he might contrive to gain his living there, and avouching his intention never more to return to Florence. Canigiano was concerned for this and said, Ill hast thou done and ill hast thou carried thyself. Thou hast disobeyed thy masters and hast, at one cast, spent a great sum of money in wantonness. But since it is done, we must look for other what. Accordingly, like a shrewd man as he was, he speedily bethought himself what was to be done and told it to Salibido, who was pleased with the device and set about putting it in execution. He had some money, and Canigiano having lent him other sum, he made up a number of bales well packed and corded. Then, buying a score of old casks and filling them, he embarked the whole and returned to Palermo, where, having given the custom-house officers the bill of lading and the value of the casks, and let enter everything to his account, he laid the whole up in the magazines, saying that he meant not to touch them till such time as certain other merchandise which he expected should be come. Biancofier, getting wind of this, and hearing that the merchandise he had presently brought with him was worth good 2,000 florins, without reckoning what he looked for, which was valued at more than 3,000, bethought herself that she had flown at too small game and determined to restore him the 500 florins, so she might avail to have the greater part of the 5,000. Accordingly, she sent for him, and Salibido, grown cunning, went to her. Whereupon, making believe to know nothing of that which he had brought with him, she received him with a great show of fondness and said to him, Hark I, if thou wast vexed with me, for that I repaid thee not thy monies on the very day. Salabito fell a-laughing and answered, In truth, madam, it did somewhat displease me, seeing I would have torn out my very heart to give it you, and I thought to pleasure you withal. But I will have you hear how I am vexed with you. Such and so great is the love I bear you, that I have sold the most part of my possessions, and have presently brought hither merchandise to the value of more than 2,000 florins, and expect from the westward as much more as will be worth over 3,000, with which I mean to stock me a warehouse in this city, and take up my sojourn here. So I may still be near you, meseeming I fare better of your love than ever lover of his lady. Look you, Salabito, answered the lady, every commodity of thine is mighty pleasing to me, as that of him whom I love more than my life, and it pleaseth me amain that thou art returned hither with intent to sojourn here, for that I hope yet to have good time galore with thee. But I would fain excuse myself some dull to thee for that, weenas thou wast about to depart, thou wouldst by times have come hither and couldst not, and whiles thou camest and wast not so gladly seen as thou wast used to be, more by token that I returned thee not thy monies at the time promised. Thou must know that I was then in very great concern and sore affliction, and whoso is in such case, how much soever he may love another, cannot always show him so cheerful a countenance or pay him such attention as he might wish. Moreover, thou must know that it is mighty uneasy for a woman to avail to find 1,000 gold florins. All day long we are put off with lies, and that which is promised us is not performed unto us. Wherefore needs must we in our turn lie unto others. Hence cometh it, and not of my default, that I gave thee not back thy monies. However, I had them a little after thy departure, and had I known whither to send them, thou mayst be assured that I would have remitted them to thee, but not knowing this, I kept them for thee. Then, letting fetch a purse wherein were the very monies he had brought her, she put it into his hand, saying, Count them if there be 500. Never was Salabito so glad. He counted them, and finding them 500, put them up and said, Madam, I am assured that you say sooth, but you have done enough to convince me of your love for me. And I tell you that, for this and for the love I bear you, you could never require me, for any your occasion, of whatsoever sum I might command, but I would oblige you therewith. And weenas I am established here, you may put this to the proof. Having again on this wise renewed his loves with her in words, he fell again to using amicably with her, whilst she made much of him, and showed him the greatest good will and honor in the world, feigning the utmost love for him. But he, having a mind to return her cheat for cheat, being one day sent for by her to sup and sleep with her, went thither so chapfallen and so woe-begone that it seemed as he would die. Buying Kofir, embracing him and kissing him, began to question him of what ailed him to be thus melancholy, and he, after letting himself be importuned a good while, answered, I am a ruined man, for that the ship, wherein is the merchandise I expected, hath been taken by the corsairs of Monaco, and held to ransom in 10,000 gold florins, whereof it falleth to me to pay 1,000, and I have not a farthing. For that the 500 pieces thou returnedst to me, I sent incontinent to Naples to lay out in cloths to be brought hither. And should I go about at this present to sell the merchandise I have here, I should scarce get a penny for 2 pennyworth, for that it is no time for selling. Nor am I yet so well known that I could find any here to help me to this, wherefore I know not what to do or to say. For, if I send not the monies speedily, the merchandise will be carried off to Monaco, and I shall never again have aught thereof. The lady was mightily concerned at this, fearing to lose him altogether, and considering how she should do, so he might not go to Monaco, said, God knoweth I am sore concerned for the love of thee, but what availeth it to afflict oneself thus? If I had the monies, God knoweth I would lend them to the incontinent, but I have them not. True, there is a certain person here who obliged me the other day with the 500 florins that I lacked, but he will have heavy usance for his monies. Nay, he requireth no less than 30 in the 100, and if thou wilt borrow of him, needs must he be made secure with a good pledge. For my part, I am ready to engage for thee all these my goods and my person, to boot, for as much as he will lend thereon. But how wilt thou assure him of the rest? Salabito readily apprehended the reason that moved her to do him this service, and divined that it was she herself who was to lend him the money, wherewith he was well pleased, and thanking her, answered that he would not be put off for exorbitant usance, need constraining him. Moreover, he said that he would give assurance of the merchandise he had in the custom house, letting inscribe it to him who should lend him the money. But that needs must be kept the key of the magazines, as well that he might be able to show his wares, and it were required of him, as that nothing might be touched or changed or tampered withal. The lady answered that it was well said, and that this was good enough assurance. Wherefore, as soon as the day was come, she sent for a broker, in whom she trusted greatly, and taking order with him of the matter, gave him 1,000 gold florins, which he lent to Saladino, letting inscribe in his own name at the custom house that which the latter had there. Then, having made their writings and counterwritings together and being come to an accord, they occupied themselves with their other affairs. Saladino, as soon as he might, embarked, with the 1,500 gold florins, on board a little ship, and returned to Pietro dello Canigiano at Naples, whence he remitted to his masters, who had dispatched him with the stuffs, a good and entire account thereof. Then, having repaid Pietro and every other to whom he owed aught, he made merry several days with Canigiano over the cheat he had put upon the Sicilian trickstress. After which, resolved to be no more a merchant, he betook himself to Ferrara. Footnote 421, i.e., having executed and exchanged the necessary legal documents for the proper carrying out of the transaction, and completed the matter to their mutual satisfaction. Meanwhile, Biancofier, finding that Saladino had left Palermo, began to marvel and wax misdoubtful, and after having awaited him good 2 months, seeing that he came not, she caused the broker force open the magazines. Trying first the casks, which she believed to be filled with oil, she found them full of seawater, save that there was in each maybe a runlet of oil at the top near the bunghole. Then, undoing the bales, she found them all full of tow, with the exception of 2, which were stuffs. And in brief, with all that was there was not more than 200 florins worth. Wherefore Biancofier, confessing herself outwitted, long lamented the 500 florins repaid, and yet more the 1,000 lent, saying often, "Who with a Tuscan hath to do, must nor be blind nor see askew." On this wise, having got nothing for her pains but loss and scorn, she found to her cost that some folk know as much as others. No sooner had Dionio made an end of his story than Lauretta, knowing the term to become beyond which she was not to reign, and having commended Canigiano's counsel, which was approved good by its effect, and Saladino's shrewdness, which was no less commendable in carrying it into execution, lifted the laurel from her own head and set it on that of Emilia, saying with womanly grace, "Madam, I know not how pleasant a queen we shall have of you, but at the least we shall have a fair one. Look then that your actions be conformable to your beauties." So saying, she returned to her seat, whilst Emilia, a thought abashed, not so much at being made queen as to see herself publicly commended of that which women use most to covet, waxed such in face as are the new-blown roses in the dawning. However, after she had kept her eyes a while lowered, till the redness had given place, she took order with the seneschal of that which concerned the general entertainment, and presently said, "Delightsome ladies, it is common, after oxen have twalled some part of the day, confined under the yoke, to see them loosed and eased thereof and freely suffered to go a-pasturing, where most it liketh them, about the woods. And it is manifest also that leafy gardens, embowered with various plants, are not less, but much more fair than groves wherein one seeth only oaks. Wherefore, seeing how many days we have discoursed, under the restraint of a fixed law, I opine that, as well unto us as to those whom need constraineth to labor for their daily bread, it is not only useful, but necessary, to play the truant a while and wandering thus afield, to regain strength to enter anew under the yoke. Wherefore, for that which is to be related tomorrow, ensuing your delectable usance of discourse, I purpose not to restrict you to any special subject, but will have each discourse according as it pleaseth him, holding it for certain that the variety of the things which will be said will afford us no less entertainment than to have discoursed of one alone. And having done thus, whoso shall come after me in the sovereignty may, as stronger than I, avail with greater assurance to restrict us within the limits of the wonted laws." So saying, she set every one at liberty till supper time. All commended the queen of that which she had said, holding it sagely spoken, and rising to their feet, addressed themselves, this to one kind of diversion and that to another, the ladies to weaving garlands and to gambling, and the young men to gaming and singing. On this wise they passed the time until the supper hour, which being come, they supped with mirth and good cheer about the fair fountain, and after diverted themselves with singing and dancing according to the wonted usance. At last, the queen, to ensue the fashion of her predecessors, commanded Pamphilo to sing a song, notwithstanding those which sundry of the company had already sung of their free will. And he readily began thus. Such is thy pleasure, love, and such the allegress I feel thereby that happy, burning in thy fire am I. The abounding gladness in my heart that glows, for the high joy and dear whereto thou hast me led, unable to contain there, overflows, and in my face's cheer displays my happy head. For being enamored in such a worship-worthy place, and high makes eath to me the burning I abide. I cannot with my finger what I feel limn, love, nor do I know my bliss in song to vent. Nay, though I knew it, needs must I conceal, for once divulged, I trow, 'twould turn to dreariment. Yet am I so content, all speech were halt and feeble, did I try the least thereof with words to signify. Who might conceive it that these arms of mine should anywise attain, whereas I've held them I, or that my face should reach so fair a shrine as that, of favor, fame, and grace, I've won to. Nay, such fortune ne'er a day believed me were, whence all afire am I, hiding the source of my lease thereby. This was the end of Pamphilo's song, whereto albeit it had been completely responded of all, there was none but noted the words thereof with more attent solicitude than pertained unto him, studying to divine that which, as he sang, it behoved him to keep hidden from them. And although sundry went imagining various things, nevertheless none happened upon the truth of the case. But the queen, seeing that the song was ended, and that both young ladies and men would gladly rest themselves, commanded that all should betake themselves to bed. Footnote 422. The song sung by Pamphilo, under which name, as I have before pointed out, the author appears to represent himself, apparently alludes to Boccaccio's amours with the Princess Maria of Naples, Fiammetta, by whom his passion was returned in kind. Here and ETH, the 8th day of the Decameron. Day the 9th. Here BGINETH, the 9th day of the Decameron, wherein, under the governance of EMILIA, each DISCORSETH, according as it pleaseth HIM, and of that which is most to his liking. The light, from whose resplendence the night fleeth, had already changed all the 8th heaven from azure to watchet color, and the flowerets began to lift their heads along the meads. When Emilia, uprising, let call the ladies her comrades, and on likewise the young men, who, being come, fared forth, ensuing the slow steps of the queen, and betook themselves to a coppice but little distant from the palace. Therein entering, they saw the animals, wild goats and deer and others, as if assured of security from the hunters by reason of the prevailing pestilence, stand awaiting them no otherwise than as they were grown without fear or tame, and diverted themselves a while with them, drawing near, now to this one and now to that, as if they would fain lay hands on them, and making them run and skip. But the sun now waxing high, they deemed it well to turn back. They were all garlanded with oak leaves, with their hands full of flowers and sweet-scented herbs, and whoso encountered them had said no other what than or these shall not be overcome of death, or it will slay them merry. On this wise, then, they fared on, step by step, singing and chatting and laughing, till they came to the palace, where they found everything orderly disposed and their servants full of mirth and joyous cheer. Their having rested a while, they went not to dinner till 6 canzonets, each merrier than other, had been caroled by the young men and the ladies. Then, water being given to their hands, the seneschal seated them all at table, according to the queen's pleasure, and the viands being brought, they all ate blithely. Rising thence, they gave themselves a while to dancing and music-making, and after, by the queen's commandment, whoso would betook himself to rest. But presently, the wonted hour being come, all in the accustomed place assembled to discourse, whereupon the queen, looking at Philomela, bade her give commencement to the stories of that day, and she, smiling, began on this wise. Footnote 423. According to the Ptolemaic system, the earth is encompassed by 8 celestial zones or heavens, the first or highest, above which is the empyrean, otherwise called the 9th heaven, is that of the moon, the 2nd that of Mercury, the 3rd that of Venus, the 4th that of the Sun, the 5th that of Mars, the 6th that of Jupiter, the 7th that of Saturn, and the 8th or lowest that of the fixed stars and of the earth. Footnote 424, Dazzarino in color Silstro. This is one of the many passages in which Boccaccio has imitated Dante, cf. Purgatorio c. Roman 26. 2. 46. Il Sole. Chi gia, ragiando, tutto l'Occidente mutava in bianco aspetto di Silstro. And also one of the innumerable instances in which former translators, who all agree in making the advent of the light, change the color of the sky from azure to a darker color, instead of, as Boccaccio intended, to watch it, i.e. a paler or grayish blue, have misrendered the text for sheer ignorance of the author's meaning. The first story, Madame Frincca, being courted by one Rinuccio Palirmani and one Alias Sandiro, Chirmuntiasi, and loving neither the one nor the other, adroitly riddth herself of both by causing one enter for dead into a sepulchre and the other bring him forth thereof for dead, on such wise that they cannot avail to accomplish the condition imposed. Since it is your pleasure, madam, I am well pleased to be she who shall run the first ring in this open and free field of storytelling, wherein your magnificence hath set us. The which and I do well, I doubt not, but that those who shall come after will do well and better. Many a time, charming ladies, hath it been shown in our discourses what and how great is the power of love. Nathless, for that me deemeth not it hath been fully spoken thereof, no, nor would be, though we should speak of nothing else for a year to come. And that not only doth love bring lovers into divers dangers of death, but causeth them even to enter for dead into the abiding places of the dead. It is my pleasure to relate to you a story thereof, over and above those which have been told, whereby not only will you apprehend the puissance of love, but will know the wit used by a worthy lady in ridding herself of two who loved her against her will. You must know, then, that there was once in the city of Pistia a very fair widow lady, of whom two of our townsmen, called the one Renuccio Palermini and the other Alessandro Chiaramontesi, there abiding by reason of banishment from Florence, were, without knowing one of other, passionately enamored, having by chance fallen in love with her, and doing privily each his utmost endeavor to win her favor. The gentlewoman in question, whose name was Madame Francesca de Lazzari, being still importuned of the one and the other with messages and entreaties, to which she had while somewhat unwisely given ear, and desiring, but in vain, discreetly to retract, bethought herself how she might avail to rid herself of their importunity by requiring them of a service, which, albeit it was possible, she conceived that neither of them would render her, to the intent that, they not doing that which she required, she might have a fair and colorable occasion of refusing to hearken more to their messages, and the device which occurred to her was on this wise. There had died that very day at Pistia one, who, albeit his ancestors were gentlemen, was reputed the worst man that was, not only in Pistia, but in all the world. More by token that he was in his lifetime so misshapen and of so monstrous a favor that whoso knew him not, seeing him for the first time, had been afeard of him, and he had been buried in a tomb without the church of the minor friars. This circumstance she bethought herself would in part be very apt to her purpose, and accordingly she said to a maid of hers, "Thou knowest the annoy and the vexation I suffer all day long by the messages of yonder two Florentines, Renuccio and Alessandro. Now I am not disposed to gratify them with my love, and to rid myself of them, I have bethought myself, for the great proffers that they make, to seek to make proof of them in somewhat which I am certain they will not do. So shall I do away from me this their importunity, and thou shalt see how. Thou knowest that Scanadio, for so was the wicked man called of whom we have already spoken, was this morning buried in the burial place of the minor brethren, Scanadio, of whom, ween as they saw him alive, let alone dead, the doughtiest men of the city went in fear. Wherefore go thou privily first to Alessandro and bespeak him, saying, Madame Francesca giveth thee to know that now is the time come weenas thou mayst have her love, which thou hast so much desired, and be with her, and thou wilt on this wise. This night, for a reason which thou shalt know after, the body of Scanadio, who was this morning buried, is to be brought to her house by a kinsman of hers, and she, being in great fear of him, dead though he be, would fain not have him there. Wherefore she prayeth thee that it please thee, by way of doing her a great service, go this evening at the time of the first sleep, to the tomb wherein he is buried, and donning the dead man's clothes, abide as thou wert he until such time as they shall come for thee. Then, without moving or speaking, thou must suffer thyself be taken up out of the tomb and carried to her house, where she will receive thee, and thou mayst after abide with her and depart at thy leisure, leaving to her the care of the rest. And he say that he will do it, well and good. But should he refuse, bid him on my part, never more show himself whereas I may be and look, as he valueth his life, that he send me no more letters or messages. Then shalt thou betake thee to Renuccio Palermini, and say to him, Madam Francesca saith that she is ready to do thine every pleasure, and thou wilt render her a great service. To wit, that tonight, towards the middle hour, thou get thee to the tomb wherein Scannadio was this morning buried, and take him up softly thence, and bring him to her at her house, without saying a word of aught thou mayst hear or feel. There shalt thou learn what she would with him, and have of her thy pleasure. But an it please thee not to do this, she chargeth thee never more send her writ nor message. Footnote 425. Scannadio signifies murder god, and was no doubt a nickname bestowed upon the dead man, on account of his wicked and reprobate way of life. The maid betook herself to the two lovers and did her errand punctually to each, saying as it had been enjoined her. Whereto each made answer that, and it pleased her, they would go, not only into a tomb, but into hell itself. The maid carried their reply to the lady, and she waited to see if they would be mad enough to do it. The night come, ween as it was the season of the first sleep, Alessandro Chiaramontesi, having stripped himself to his doublet, went forth of his house to take Scannadio's place in the tomb. But by the way there came a very frightful thought into his head, and he fell a-saying in himself, Good lack, what a fool I am! Whither go I? How know I but yonder woman's kinsfolk, having maybe perceived that I love her, and believing that which is not, have caused me do this, so they may slaughter me in yonder tomb. And it should happen thus, I should suffer for it, nor would aught in the world be ever known thereof to their detriment. Or what know I but maybe some enemy of mine hath procured me this, whom she belike loveth and seeketh to oblige therein? Then said he, But, grant that neither of these things be, and that her kinsfolk are e'en for carrying me to her house, I must believe that they want not Scannadio's body to hold it in their arms, or to put it in hers. Nay, it is rather to be conceived that they mean to do it some mischief, as the body of one who may be disobliged them in somewhat aforetime. She saith that I am not to say a word for aught that I may feel. But should they put out mine eyes, or draw my teeth, or lop off my hands, or play me any other such trick, how shall I do? How could I abide quiet? And if I speak, they will know me and mayhap do me a mischief. Or, though they do me no hurt, yet shall I have accomplished nothing, for that they will not leave me with the lady, whereupon she will say that I have broken her commandment, and will never do aught to pleasure me. So saying, he had well nigh returned home. But nevertheless, his great love urged him on with counter-arguments of such potency that they brought him to the tomb, which he opened, and entering therein, stripped Scannadio of his clothes. Then donning them and shutting the tomb upon himself, he laid himself in the dead man's place. Thereupon he began to call to mind what manner of man the latter had been, and remembering him of all the things whereof he had aforetime heard tell as having befallen by night, not to say in the sepulchres of the dead, but even otherwhere, his every hair began to stand on end, and him seemed each moment as if Scannadio should rise upright and butcher him then and there. However, aided by his ardent love, he got the better of these and the other fearful thoughts that beset him, and abiding as he were the dead man, he fell to awaiting that which should betide him. Meanwhile Renuccio, midnight being now at hand, departed his house to do that which had been enjoined him of his mistress, and as he went, he entered into many and various thoughts of the things which might possibly betide him. As to wit, that he might fall into the hands of the police, with Scannadio's body on his shoulders, and be doomed to the fire as a sorcerer, and that he should, and the thing came to be known, incur the ill will of his kinsfolk, and other like thoughts, whereby he was like to have been deterred. But after bethinking himself again, Alack, quoth he, shall I deny this gentlewoman, whom I have so loved and love, the first thing she requireth of me, especially as I am thereby to gain her favor? God forbid, though I were certainly to die thereof, but I should set myself to do that which I have promised. Accordingly, he went on, and presently coming to the sepulchre, opened it easily, which Alessandro hearing, abode still, albeit he was in great fear. Renuccio, entering in and thinking to take Scannadio's body, laid hold of Alessandro's feet, and drew him forth of the tomb. Then, hoisting him on his shoulders, he made off towards the lady's house. Going thus and taking no manner of heed to his burden, he jolted it many a time now against one corner, and now another of certain benches that were beside the way, more by token that the night was so cloudy and so dark he could not see whither he went. He was already well nigh at the door of the gentlewoman, who had posted herself at the window with her maid, to see if he would bring Alessandro, and was ready armed with an excuse to send them both away, when it chanced that the officers of the watch, who were ambushed in the street and abode silently on the watch to lay hands upon a certain outlaw, hearing the scuffling that Renuccio made with his feet, suddenly put out a light, to see what was to do and whither to go, and rattled their targets and halberds, crying, "Who goeth there?" Renuccio, seeing this and having scant time for deliberation, let fall his burden and made off as fast as his legs would carry him. Whereupon Alessandro arose in haste and made off in his turn, for all he was hampered with the dead man's clothes, which were very long. The lady, by the light of the lantern put out by the police, had plainly recognized Renuccio, with Alessandro on his shoulders, and perceiving the latter to be clad in Scannadio's clothes, marveled amain at the exceeding hardihood of both. But, for all her wonderment, she laughed heartily to see Alessandro cast down on the ground, and to see him after take to flight. Then, rejoiced at this accident and praising God that he had rid her of the annoy of these twain, she turned back into the house and betook herself to her chamber, avouching to her maid that without doubt they both loved her greatly, since, as it appeared, they had done that which she had enjoined them. Meanwhile Renuccio, woeful and cursing his ill fortune, for all that returned not home, but as soon as the watch had departed the neighborhood, he came back whereas he had dropped Alessandro and groped about, to see if he could find him again, so he might make an end of his service. But finding him not, and concluding that the police had carried him off, he returned to his own house, woebegone, whilst Alessandro, unknowing what else to do, made off home on like wise, chagrined at such a misadventure, and without having recognized him who had borne him thither. On the morrow, Scannadio's tomb being found open, and his body not to be seen, for that Alessandro had rolled it to the bottom of the vault, all Pistoia was busy with various conjectures anent the matter, and the simpler sort concluded that he had been carried off by the devils. Nevertheless, each of the two lovers signified to the lady that which he had done, and what had befallen, and excusing himself withal for not having full accomplished her commandment, claimed her favor and her love. But she, making believe to credit neither of this, rid herself of them with a curt response to the effect that she would never consent to do aught for them, since they had not done that which she had required of them. The second story. An abbess, arising in haste and in the dark, to find one of her nuns, who had been denounced to her, in bed with her lover and thinking to cover her head with her coif, donneth instead thereof the breeches of a priest who is abed with her. The which the accused none observing and making her aware thereof, she is acquitted, and hath leisure to be with her lover. Philomena was now silent, and the lady's address in ridding herself of those whom she chose not to love having been commended of all, whilst, on the other hand, the presumptuous hardihood of the two gallants was held of them to be not love, but madness, the queen said gaily to Elissa, follow on. Accordingly she promptly began. Adroitly, indeed, dearest ladies, did Madame Francesca contrive to rid herself of her annoy, as hath been told. But a young nun, fortune aiding her, delivered herself with an apt speech from an imminent peril. As you know, there be many very dull folk, who set up for teachers and censors of others, but whom, as you may apprehend from my story, fortune bytimes deservedly putteth to shame, as befell the abbess, under whose governance was the nun of whom I have to tell. You must know, then, that there was once in Lombardy a convent, very famous for sanctity and religion, wherein, amongst the other nuns who were there, was a young lady of noble birth and gifted with marvelous beauty, who was called Isabetta, and who, coming one day to the grate to speak with a kinsman of hers, fell in love with a handsome young man who accompanied him. The latter, seeing her very fair and divining her wishes with his eyes, became on like wise enamored of her. And this love they suffered a great while without fruit, to the no small unease of each. At last, each being solicited by a like desire, the young man hit upon a means of coming at his nun in all secrecy, and she consenting thereto, He visited her, not once, but many times, to the great contentment of both. But this continuing, it chanced one night that he was, without the knowledge of himself or his mistress, seen of one of the ladies of the convent to take leave of Isabella and go his ways. The nun communicated her discovery to divers others, and they were minded at first to denounce Isabella to the abbess, who was called Madame Eusimbalda, and who, in the opinion of the nuns and of whosoever knew her, was a good and pious lady. But, on consideration, they bethought themselves to seek to have the abbess take her with the young man, so there might be no room for denial. Accordingly, they held their peace and kept watch by turns in secret to surprise her. Now it chanced that Isabella, suspecting nothing of this nor being on her guard, caused her lover come thither one night, which was forthright known to those who were on the watch for this, and who, ween as it seemed to them time, a good part of the night being spent, divided themselves into two parties, whereof one abode on guard at the door of her cell, whilst the other ran to the abbess's chamber and knocking at the door, till she answered, said to her, "Up, madam. Arise quickly, for we have discovered that Isabella hath a young man in her cell." Now the abbess was that night in company with a priest, whom she ofttimes let come to her in a chest. But hearing the nuns' outcry and fearing lest, of their overhaste and eagerness, they should push open the door, she hurriedly arose and dressed herself as best she might in the dark. Thinking to take certain plaited veils, which nuns wear on their heads and call a psalter, she caught up by chance the priest's breeches, and such was her haste that, without remarking what she did, she threw them over her head in lieu of the psalter, and going forth, hurriedly locked the door after her, saying, "Where is this accursed one of God?" Then, in company with the others, who were so ardent and so intent upon having Isabella taken in default that they noted not that which the abbess had on her head, she came to the cell door and breaking it open, with the aid of the others, entered and found the two lovers abed in each other's arms, who, all confounded at such a surprise, abode fast, unknowing what to do. The young lady was incontinent seized by the other nuns and haled off, by command of the abbess, to the chapter house, whilst her gallant dressed himself and abode await to see what should be the issue of the adventure, resolved, if any hurt were offered to his mistress, to do a mischief to as many nuns as he could come at and carry her off. The abbess, sitting in chapter, proceeded, in the presence of all the nuns, who had no eyes but for the culprit, to give the latter the foulest rating that ever woman had, as having by her lewd and filthy practices, and the thing should come to be known without the walls, sullied the sanctity, the honor and the fair fame of the convent. And to this she added very grievous menaces. The young lady, shamefast and fearful, as feeling herself guilty, knew not what to answer and keeping silence, possessed the other nuns with compassion for her. However, after a while, the abbess multiplying words, she chanced to raise her eyes and espied that which the former had on her head, and the hose points that hung down therefrom on either side. Whereupon, guessing how the matter stood, she was all reassured and said, "Madam, God aid you, tie up your coif, and after say what you will to me." The abbess, taking not her meaning, answered, "What coif, vile woman that thou art? Hast thou the face to bandy pleasantries at such a time? Thinkest thou this that thou hast done is a jesting matter? Prithee, madam," answered Isabella, "tie up your coif, and after say what you will to me." Thereupon many of the nuns raised their eyes to the abbess's head, and she also, putting her hand thereto, perceived, as did the others, why Isabella spoke thus. Wherefore the abbess, becoming aware of her own default, and perceiving that it was seen of all, past hope of recoverance, changed her note, and proceeding to speak after a fashion altogether different from her beginning, came to the conclusion that it is impossible to withstand the pricks of the flesh. Wherefore she said that each should, ween as she might, privily give herself a good time, even as it had been done until that day. Accordingly, setting the young lady free, she went back to sleep with her priest, and Isabella returned to her lover, whom many a time thereafter she let come thither, in despite of those who envied her, whilst those of the others who were loverless pushed their fortunes in secret, as best they knew. The third story. Master Simon, 80 the instance of Bruno, and Buffalamacicio and Nello, maketh Calandrino believe that he is with child, wherefore he giveth them capons and money for medicines and recovereth without bringing forth. After Alyssa had finished her story and all the ladies had returned thanks to God, who had with a happy issue delivered the young nun from the claws of her envious companions, the queen bade Philostrato follow on, and he, without awaiting further commandment, began, "Fairest ladies, the unmannerly lout of a Marchigan judge, of whom I told you yesterday, took out of my mouth a story of Calandrino and his companions, which I was about to relate. And for that, albeit it hath been much discoursed of him and them, aught that is told of him cannot do otherwise than add to our merriment, I will e'en tell you that which I had then in mind. It hath already been clearly enough shown who Calandrino was, and who were the others of whom I am to speak in this story, wherefore, without further preface, I shall tell you that an aunt of his chanced to die and left him 200 crowns in small coin. Whereupon he fell a-talking of wishing to buy an estate, and entered into treaty with all the brokers in Florence, as if he had 10,000 gold florins to expend. But the matter still fell through, when they came to the price of the estate in question. Bruno and Buffalmacco, knowing all this, had told him once and again that he were better spend the money in making merry together with them than go buy land, as if he had had to make pellets. But far from this, they had never even availed to bring him to give them once to eat. One day, as they were complaining of this, there came up a comrade of theirs, a painter by name Nello, and they all three took counsel together how they might find a means of greasing their gullets at Calandrino's expense. Wherefore, without more delay, having agreed among themselves of that which was to do, they watched next morning for his coming forth of his house, nor had he gone far when Nello accosted him, saying, "Good day, Calandrino." Calandrino answered God give him good day and good year, and Nello, halting a while, fell to looking him in the face. Whereupon Calandrino asked him, "At what lookest thou?" Quoth the painter, "Hath aught ailed thee this night? Meseemeth thou are not thyself this morning." Calandrino incontinent began to quake and said, "Alack, how so? What deemest thou aileth me?" "Egad," answered Nello, "as for that I can't say, but thou seemest to me all changed, belike it is nothing." So saying, he let him pass, and Calandrino fared on, all misdoubtful, albeit he felt no whit ailing. But Buffalmacco, who was not far off, seeing him quit of Nello, made for him, and saluting him, enquired if aught ailed him. Quoth Calandrino, "I know not. Nay, Nello told me, but now that I seem to him all changed. Can it be that aught aileth me?" "Aye," rejoined Buffalmacco, "there must e'en be something or other amiss with thee, for thou appearest half dead." Footnote 426, i.e. balls for a pellet bow, usually made out of clay. Bruno and Buffalmacco were punning upon the double meaning, land and earth, or clay, of the word terra. By this time it seemed to Calandrino that he had the fevers, when, lo, up came Bruno, and the first thing he said was, "Calandrino, what manner of face is this?" Calandrino, hearing them all in the same tale, held it for certain that he was in an ill way and asked them, all aghast, "What shall I do?" Quoth Bruno, "Methinketh thou wert best return home, and get thee to bed, and cover thyself well, and send thy water to Master Simon the doctor, who is, as thou knowest, as our very creature, and will tell thee incontinent what thou must do. We will go with thee, and if it behoveth to do aught, we will do it." Accordingly, Nello having joined himself to them, they returned home with Calandrino, who betook himself, all dejected, into the bedchamber, and said to his wife, "Come, cover me well, for I feel myself sore disordered." Then laying himself down, he dispatched his water by a little maid to Master Simon, who then kept shop in the old market, at the sign of the pumpkin, whilst Bruno said to his comrades, "Abide you here with him, whilst I go hear what the doctor saith and bring him hither, if need be." "Aye, for God's sake, comrade mine," cried Calandrino, "go thither and bring me back word how the case standeth, for I feel I know not what within me." Accordingly, Bruno posted off to Master Simon, and coming thither before the girl who brought the water, acquainted him with the case. Wherefore, the maid being come and the physician, having seen the water, he said to her, "Begone and bid Calandrino keep himself well warm, and I will come to him incontinent and tell him that which aileth him and what he must do." The maid reported this to her master, nor was it long before the physician and Bruno came, whereupon the former, seating himself beside Calandrino, fell to feeling his pulse, and presently, the patient's wife being there present, he said, "Hark I, Calandrino, to speak to thee as a friend, there aileth thee naught but that thou art with child." When Calandrino heard this, he fell a-roaring for dolour and said, "Woe's me! Tessa, this is thy doing, for that thou wilt still be uppermost. I told thee how it would be. The lady, who was a very modest person, hearing her husband speak thus, blushed all red for shamefastness, and hanging her head, went out of the room without answering a word, whilst Calandrino, pursuing his complaint, said, Alack, wretch that I am! How shall I do? How shall I bring forth this child? Whence shall he issue? I see plainly I am a dead man, through the mad lust of yonder wife of mine, whom God make as woeful as I would fain be glad. Were I as well as I am not, I would arise and deal her so many and such buffets that I would break every bone in her body, albeit it e'en serveth me right, for that I should never have suffered her get the upper hand. But for certain, and I come off alive this time, she may die of desire ere she do it again. Bruno and Buffalmacco and Nello were like to burst with laughter, hearing Calandrino's words. However, they contained themselves, but Dr. Simple Simon laughed so immoderately that you might have drawn every tooth in his head. Finally, Calandrino, commending himself to the physician and praying him give him aid and counsel in this his strait, the latter said to him, Calandrino, I will not have thee lose heart, for praised be God, we have taken the case so betimes that, in a few days and with a little trouble, I will deliver thee thereof, but it will cost thee some little expense. Alack, doctor mine, cried Calandrino, I, for the love of God, do it. I have here 200 crowns, wherewith I was minded to buy me an estate. Take them all, if need be, so I be not brought to bed. For I know not how I should do, seeing I hear women make such a terrible outcry, whereas they are about to bear child, for all they have ample commodity therefore, that methinketh, if I had that pain to suffer, I should die ere I came to the bringing forth. Quoth the doctor, Have no fear of that. I will let make thee a certain tisson of distilled waters, very good and pleasant to drink, which will in 3 mornings' time carry off everything and leave thee sounder than a fish. But look thou be more discreet for the future, and suffer not thyself fall again into these follies. Now for this water it behoveth us have 3 pairs of fine fat capons, and for other things that are required thereanent, do thou give one of these, thy comrades, 5 silver crowns, so he may buy them, and let carry everything to my shop. And tomorrow, in God's name, I will send thee the distilled water aforesaid, whereof thou shalt proceed to drink a good beakerful at a time. Doctor mine, replied Calandrino, I put myself in your hands. And giving Bruno 5 crowns and money for 3 pairs of capons, he besought him to oblige him by taking the pains to buy these things. Footnote 427, Simione lit. Ape, a contemptuous distortion of Simone. The physician then took his leave, and letting make a little clary, dispatched it to Calandrino, whilst Bruno, buying the capons and other things necessary for making good cheer, ate them in company with his comrades and Master Simone. Calandrino drank of his clary 3 mornings, after which the doctor came to him, together with his comrades, and feeling his pulse, said to him, Calandrino, thou art certainly cured. Wherefore henceforth thou mayst safely go about than every business, nor abide longer at home for this. Accordingly, Calandrino arose, overjoyed, and went about his occasions, mightily extolling, as often as he happened to speak with anyone, the fine cure that Master Simone had wrought of him, in that he had unbegotten him with child in 3 days' time, without any pain. Whilst Bruno and Buffalmacco and Nello abode well pleased at having contrived with this device to overreach his niggardliness, albeit Dame Tessa, smoking the cheat, rated her husband Amin thereanent. Footnote 428, Chiria. According to the commentators, the composition of this drink is unknown, but that of clary, a sort of hippocras or spiced wine clear-strained, whence the name, offers no difficulty to the student of Old English literature. The 4th story. Ciccio, fortrgio gmith at buencio, all his good and the monies of Ciccio Angelo, moreover, running after the latter, in his shirt, and avouching that he hath robbed him, he causith him be taken of the countryfolk. Then, donning Angioli's clothes and mounting his palfrey, he maketh off and leavth the other in his shirt. Calandrino's speech concerning his wife had been hearkened of all the company with the utmost laughter. Then, Philostrato being silent, Nephil, as the queen willed it, began, Noble ladies, were it not uneither for men to show forth unto others their wit and their worth, than it is for them to exhibit their folly and their vice, many would weary themselves in vain to put a bridle on their tongues. And this hath right well been made manifest to you by the folly of Calandrino, who had no call, in seeking to be made whole of the ailment in which his simplicity caused him believe, to publish the privy diversions of his wife. And this hath brought to my mind somewhat of contrary purport to itself, to wit, a story of how one man's knavery got the better of another's wit, to the grievous hurt and confusion of the overreached one, the which it pleaseth me to relate to you. There were then in Siena, not many years ago, two, as far as age went, full-grown men, each of whom was called Secco. One was the son of Messer Angiolieri, and the other of Messer Forderigo. And albeit in most other things they sorted ill of fashions one with the other, they were nathless so far of accord in one particular, to wit, that they were both hated of their fathers, that they were by reason thereof grown friends, and companied often together. After a while, Angiolieri, who was both a handsome man and a well-mannered, him seeming he could ill live at Siena of the provision assigned him of his father, and hearing that a certain cardinal, a great patron of his, was come into the marches of Ancona as the Pope's legate, determined to betake himself to him, thinking thus to better his condition. Accordingly, acquainting his father with his purpose, he took order with him to have at once that which he was to give him in 6 months, so he might clothe and horse himself and make an honorable figure. As he went seeking someone whom he might carry with him for his service, the thing came to Forderigo's knowledge, whereupon he presently repaired to Angiolieri and besought him, as best he knew, to carry him with him, offering himself to be to him lackey and serving man and all, without any wage beyond his expenses paid. Angiolieri answered that he would nowise take him, not but he knew him to be right well sufficient unto every manner of service, but for that he was a gambler and by times a drunkard, to boot. But the other replied that he would without fail keep himself from both of these defaults, and affirmed it unto him with oaths galore, adding so many prayers that Angiolieri was prevailed upon, and said that he was content. Accordingly, they both set out one morning and went to dine at Buonconvento, where, after dinner, the heat being great, Angiolieri let make ready a bed at the inn and undressing himself, with Forderigo's aid, went to sleep, charging the latter call him at the stroke of none. As soon as his master was asleep, Forderigo betook himself to the tavern, and there, after drinking a while, he fell to gaming with certain men, who in a trice won of him some money he had, and after, the very clothes he had on his back. Whereupon, desirous of retrieving himself, he repaired, in his shirt as he was, to Angiolieri's chamber, and seeing him fast asleep, took from his purse what moneys he had, and returning to play, lost these as he had lost the others. Presently, Angiolieri awoke and arising, dressed himself and inquired for Forderigo. The latter was not to be found, and Angiolieri, concluding him to be asleep, drunken, somewhere, as was by times his wont, determined to leave him be and get himself another servant at Corsignano. Accordingly, he caused put his saddle and his valise on a palfrey he had, and thinking to pay the reckoning, so he might get him gone, found himself without a penny. Whereupon great was the outcry, and all the hostelry was in an uproar, Angiolieri declaring that he had been robbed there, and threatening to have the host and all his household carried prisoners to Siena. At this moment up came Forderigo in his shirt, thinking to take his master's clothes, as he had taken his money, and seeing the latter ready to mount, said, "What is this, Angiolieri? Must we needs be gone already? Good lack, wait a while. There will be one here forthwith who hath my doublet in pawn for 830 shillings, and I am certain that he will render it up for 35, money down." As he spoke, there came one who certified Angiolieri that it was Forderigo who had robbed him of his moneys, by showing him the sum of those which the latter had lost at play. Wherefore he was sore incensed, and loaded Forderigo with reproaches, and had he not feared others more than he feared God, he had done him a mischief. Then, threatening to have him strung up by the neck or outlawed from Siena, he mounted to horse. Forderigo, as if he spoke not to him but to another, said, "Good lack, Angiolieri, let be for the nonce this talk that skilleth not a straw, and have regard unto this. By redeeming it forthright, we may have it again for 35 shillings. Whereas, if we tarry but till tomorrow, he will not take less than the 830 he lent me thereon, and this favour he doth me for that I staked it after his counsel. Marry, why should we not better ourselves by these 3 shillings? Angiolieri, hearing him talk thus, lost all patience, more by token that he saw himself eyed askance by the bystanders, who manifestly believed not that Forderigo had gamed away his moneys, but that he had yet moneys of Forderigo's in hand, and said to him, "What have I to do with thy doublet? Mayst thou be strung up by the neck, since not only hast thou robbed me and gambled away my money, but hinderest me to boot in my journey, and now thou makest mock of me." However, Forderigo still stood to it, as it were not spoken to him, and said, "Echoed, why wilt thou not better me these 3 shillings? Thinkest thou I shall not be able to oblige thee therewith another time? Prithee do it, and thou have any regard for me. Why all this haste? We shall yet reach Torrinary betimes this evening. Come, find the purse. Thou knowest I might ransack all Siena, and not find a doublet to suit me so well as this. And to think I should let yonder fellow have it for 30 shillings. It is worth yet 40 shillings or more, so that thou wouldst worsen me in 2 ways." Angioliri, beyond measure exasperated to see himself first robbed and now held in parley after this fashion, made him no further answer, but turning his palfrey's head, took the road to Torrinary, whilst Forderigo, bethinking himself of a subtle piece of knavery, proceeded to trot after him in his shirt good 2 miles, still requiring him of his doublet. Presently, Angioliri pricking on Amain, to rid his ears of the annoy, Forderigo espied some husbandmen in a field, adjoining the highway in advance of him, and cried out to them, saying, "Stop him, stop him." Accordingly, they ran up, some with spades and others with mattocks, and presenting themselves in the road before Angioliri, concluding that he had robbed him who came crying after him in his shirt, stopped and took him. It availed him little to tell them who he was and how the case stood, and Forderigo, coming up, said with an angry air, "I know not what hindereth me from slaying thee, disloyal thief, that thou wast to make off with my gear." Then, turning to the countrymen, "See, gentlemen," quoth he, "in what a plight he left me at the inn, having first gamed away all his own. I may well say, by God, and by you have I gotten back this much, and thereof I shall still be beholden to you." Angioliri told them his own story, but his words were not heeded. Nay, Forderigo, with the aid of the countrymen, pulled him off his palfrey and stripping him, clad himself in his clothes. Then, mounting to horse, he left him in his shirt and barefoot and returned to Siena, avouching everywhere that he had won the horse and clothes of Angioliri, whilst the latter, who had thought to go, as a rich man to the cardinal in the marches, returned to Buonconvento, poor and in his shirt, nor dared for shamefastness go straight back to Siena. But some clothes being lent him, he mounted the rouncy that Forderigo had ridden and betook himself to his kinsfolk at Corsignano, with whom he abode, till such time as he was furnished anew by his father. On this wise Forderigo's knavery baffled Angioliri's fair advisement, albeit his villainy was not left by the latter unpunished in due time and place.